Hi, my name is Dorian, and this is You, Me, and the Industry. A podcast where I get to talk to people from the games industry and learn more about their job, their career, and a bunch of other stuff. This episode I get to reunite with a former colleague of mine. Dominic Eskofier, the head of Europe at the virtual reality company named Eden, joins me for a reality-bending episode. We discuss how VR changed his life, what it was like working for companies like Computech, Rockstar Games and Nvidia, and I get to learn more about the crazy world of NFT. The non-fungible tokens. Here we go. Hello everyone and welcome to the show. Today I'm very excited to be elevating this podcast into a whole new reality. With me today is Dominic Eskofier, who went through games media, PR at Rockstar Games, just casually went to Silicon Valley to start a VR company, then to Nvidia to be head of virtual reality of my region, and he's just now working at the company called Eden as the head of Europe. Just, casual stuff. Very, very typical for every person. And he's also my former supervisor, mentor, and the very first person I shared a podcast with. Dominic, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Dorian. It's a pleasure to reconnect with you after all these years and where our careers have taken different paths in the entertainment tech industry. So it's great to be here and great to be reconnected.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like I said, we shared the very first podcast together. And, who knew that right now I would be interviewing you?
Oh, the tables have turned.
Right, yeah. And it was very surreal experience back in the day because, podcasts were still kind of new for me. And it was always very exciting to be joining you at the table, at the booth. And it was always fun, I think.
Yeah, when was this actually? This must have been almost 10 years ago, eh?
Yeah, likely 10 years ago. I'm not quite sure. It was right around the time Portal 2 released, and I was writing some news about the PlayStation hack.
Oh, yeah, I remember. Wow, that was... Jesus, that's such a long time. It's crazy to think that Portal 2 has been 10 years, eh?
Yeah, right. And was and I think so far there was only one game since then.
Yeah. Is that Half-Life Alyx?
Yeah, right. And I'm going to touch upon this very soon.
That. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a good one. Good one to talk about for sure.
Yeah. So how have you been? So how are you going?
Oh, I'm awesome. I guess it's a very weird time for everybody, but my life's pretty great at the moment. So I'm working for a startup, which is an environment I really thrive in. It's exactly what I was looking for in my kind of professional journey in virtual reality. And I'm not sure if you know this, but I moved to Amsterdam to open up our European office, our Eden office in Europe. So I get to live in what I feel is one of the most beautiful, gorgeous cities in the world, even though it's very gray today, unfortunately.
Yeah, very, very typical for Germany as well. Yeah, but it's interesting because the company is from Johannesburg, South Africa, right?
It is, yeah. It's a quite a long story of how I met them. It's gone back a couple of years, and it all started when I was working at Nvidia. So as you mentioned, I was head of virtual reality for Europe, Middle East, Africa, and India. And so during one of my vacations, funny enough, I traveled to South Africa and did a little bit of groundwork for Nvidia, but also for a personal project of mine that I'll probably talk about later. And that was in 2017. And that's when I met Rick and Gary from Eden. And yeah, it's been quite a ride since then. I joined them officially in late 2019, but there were a lot of things before and between that. So maybe we'll just catch up on when we last sat together and go back almost a decade and talk a little bit about where our journeys have been going. What do you think?
Yeah, sounds great. And for I already upon my research, I saw that what you folks are doing at Eden is really incredible, and also sort of trying to alleviate some of the issues that we are. So I can't wait to learn more about that. And we can. I usually start off the show with the topic or the guest brought to the table, and you already told me your topic, and I'm really really interested in the NFT crave, the non-fungible tokens, because from my kind of observation on Twitter and stuff, some of the artists really feel threatened by it and claim that they have like some environmental damage and stuff. So I'm really curious to hear potentially maybe from a person who's already dealt and dived into the research of NFT. So to tell me something about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big topic for me because I'm very enthusiastic about the fact that it finally allows digital artists to monetize their art. That is really where my passion and my interest for NFTs is coming from, because I mean, you and I, we've both grown up in a world that is so digital, and we've looked at digital art literally all our lives, but we never considered it as art, and just because it was not framed and hung up on a wall.
Right, yeah.
But nevertheless, there's many definitions for art out there, but I feel that art is something that evokes an emotion, whether that's music or a painting or whatever. And undoubtedly, most of the art that I've seen on the internet made me smile, made me laugh, even if it's just a dumb meme like Nyan Cat, which is a great example. People like this art generates, or these visuals, these images, these paintings, this music, it evokes emotion, but only because people haven't been huge amounts of money for it doesn't mean it's not art. So suddenly somebody is putting a price tag on a JPEG, essentially, right? That's how the main mass media is at the moment taking NFTs. It's like, hey, here's a JPEG and somebody paid $69 million for it. But that's not really how it is. That's just like humans trying to apply something they already know to something new. So they're trying to apply the JPEG label to the ownership of a digital artwork. And so for me, I just find it super interesting, mostly because I feel it has a very positive notion for many digital artists out there. Because I mean, I myself, I know at least 5 digital artists that are slaving away in some corporate job, making logos and like redesigning this one item on a web page for the 100th time. Yeah. Until all the management and all the hierarchy is ready for them. They are literally, it's pretty bland spoken from my side, but they literally are throwing away their creativity for a capitalist job. Right. Not that I hate capitalism in total, like blah, blah, blah. But what I really hate is the fact that these guys could make the world a prettier place, but because nobody has been paying for digital art, they can't really make a living off of it. And I also follow the Twitter sphere. I actually restarted my account, which had a 10-year hiatus or 11-year hiatus, to re-engage with the NFT community. And it's just so heartwarming seeing those artists that can quit their jobs to make art full time and use the full potential of their creativity. And like I said, make the world a prettier place. That for me is what visual art is all about. So that's why I'm super interested in that whole topic. Is it something that you've been diving into as well? Did you buy any CryptoPunks or hash masks yet?
No, I haven't bought any of that kind, since it's all very speculative and I'm not that into the market and everything. So I'm just kind of I'm always baffled when I see the GameStop shares surge and the shareholders and something like the whole Bitcoin thing. And I'm always kind of on the fence about this stuff, because I'm not quite sure, can I really understand the market? Does anybody understand the market? And speaking of Bitcoin, it's a great segue right now, because upon doing research on you, I came across something you wrote on Facebook 7 years ago about Bitcoin.
Oh, what is it?
And you said, market, Bitcoin is going to be the future, something along those lines. Bitcoin is the future, and you're very glad that you were speaking about the bubble and how it bursted, and that you're really glad that you kind of sold them off early, and you were already late to the party when you paid 40 euros a piece. And back I think a couple of days I checked, and it was 40 as well, but it was 40,000 per Bitcoin.
Bitcoin's been that's lovely that you pulled out this quote from my side. Thank you so much. You must have scrolled a long time through my Facebook timeline to find that one. Yeah, that's 7 years ago. Yeah, that was 2014, 2013, when I first got into crypto. And well, hindsight is 2020, but I obviously should have bought way more Bitcoin back then
right.
than I had, and I should have been way more bullish on how the market will develop. But to be honest, at that point I was like 24 years old, and this wasn't really. No, I was older. I was 30 years old already at that point. But I didn't feel like I understand the market good enough. Yeah. And I was probably also too nervous to just like keep holding while the market's doing ups and downs.
Totally.
But I mean, the little bit of Bitcoin that I held, which is not much, by the way, helped me to buy some art, which actually I find kind of hilarious, because I literally bought, I don't know, 200, I kept maybe 200, 300 euros worth of Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And that now is so much money that I can actually become, a quote unquote digital art collector.
Yeah.
Which kind of feels weird, because that money came out of thin air, and now I'm giving it to an artist and they can actually make a living off of it, which is so weird. But it's the world of crypto. I mean, that's just how it goes. And I actually believe, it's funny that you're taking me back to this quote, because when I originally heard about NFTs, I had the same weird tech feeling. It's really hard for me to describe, but many of us know this that are in the tech space. You see something for the first time and you're like, holy shit, this is going to go places, but you never really act on it. So I had a couple of moments like that in my life. The first moment was when I first held an iPhone in my hand, and I was like, wait a second, that's the internet on a phone. Everybody is gonna have that. Like that was literally my first thought. I interacted with the device for like 10 seconds, 30 seconds, max a minute, surfed on some web pages, and I was like, holy shit, that's revolutionary.
Yeah.
But I never did anything with it. I saw it coming from miles away, but I never, I've never made a flashlight app, or I never made a stupid, like, whatever calendar app or horoscopes or the stuff that people got rich of, and that were really easy to program, even for somebody like me who doesn't have crazy programming experience. But back in the day, you didn't need to like make a crazy app ecosphere or ecosystem. You only had to make something that helps people live their life a little bit easier.
Yeah.
The second time I had this was in 2012, when I first tried virtual reality. And since I kind of didn't act at all on this whole iPhone thing, this revelation that I had that I did not see the consequences of, I was like, okay, virtual reality now, this is going to be a thing. Like this is exactly like I felt when I first had an iPhone in my hand. I was like, this is going to go places. It's going to become lighter, cheaper, better technology, more immersion. It's just a matter of time until tech develops that brings you higher resolution, more frame rate, and so on and so forth. Because like if you historically look at technology, it just goes up and up and up, and devices go smaller. And you see that already happening with virtual reality. And then the next time I had this like technical feeling of, oh my God, something's happening, was Bitcoin. So blockchain technology, because I felt that a decentralized currency and a digital currency makes incredible sense for a more and more digital world. And by now, a more decentralized world. And NFTs did the same thing when I came upon them earlier this year. I really thought that, and I still think this, being able to own a digital item is something that is very revolutionary, because, like I said, suddenly people can make a living off of digital items. But it's much more than that. Like you can think into the future where an NFT, which literally just means a non-fungible token, right? So you get a token that shows you are the owner of this digital asset. And you can transfer that to the real world. So think about tickets, like concert tickets, for example. Sometime in the future, why buy a concert ticket from Eventim, for example, just as an example of like a traditional ticket selling company. Why buy from them if I can buy directly from the artist and make sure that the maximum of my transaction, my love for the artist and the willingness for me to pay money to that artist, I can make sure that the majority of the money is actually going to the artist. Because what decentralized means in a lot of cases is you're cutting out the middleman. And middlemen have been making a ton of money in this economy for hundreds of years. Whether that's ticket resellers or, you really name it. Anything that can be transferred from one person to the other, and these things become more and more digital, all of these middlemen essentially get cut out, which means that you as a consumer give more money to the person that you actually want the money to go to, not somebody that's just facilitating the trade. And that's why I think, because it has that power to cut out the middleman, it's huge for a wide range of industries. And once blockchain technology is a little bit more mature, and it's happening already, like right now you can download a Chrome extension called MetaMask. For those of you who are in NFT, you obviously have heard of this. But for everybody else, it's a very nice, nifty tool for you to use the funds that you have in your wallet. And believe me or not, it's easier than PayPal. So the moment I log into my MetaMask, I have access to my funds. And the moment that a website supports Web3, so that's the moniker for anything blockchain enabled. As soon as that page has Web3, the transaction is actually much smoother than PayPal. At the moment, it's also way more expensive because that blockchain is relatively overloaded, but there's technological things that you can do around that. Anyway, now I start rambling, but I do believe that NFTs have a huge impact for industries, for the web of the future. But they also have a what would you call that? A revolutionary effect on digital art, because you can suddenly own a piece of art. And yes, you're only owning a JPEG, but it comes from the original creator. It's not different from traditional art in many ways. But yeah, that's just my take on this. And I simply cannot imagine a world in 20 years where this is not a thing. And that's what I mean with these technological revelations, that probably you also had some of those in your life, where you can see that in some kind of form, the device that you have in your hand or the technology that you're using will have an impact on the world in 20 years or 50 years or 100 years. And that for me is in order: smartphones, virtual reality, crypto, or blockchain, and NFTs in particular. What was your last time you thought, holy damn, this is going to change lives of many people?
Oh, let me think. Let me think. Well, I guess it was just the usability of everything nowadays. I guess, like when you know, like paying with PayPal, for example, and it's all integrated with like I can just, or like for example like something like Booking.com or like what's it called, this like where you can just like, I can sit on my couch at home and I can go to Poland and just check for a room, and I can just like sit in my underwear and just press the one button, and I know rented this apartment in like 8 months ahead, all on my phone. Like the combination of everything.
And here's the funny thing: when the internet came around in the 90s, what you just talked about is exactly what they were envisioning. But the people and like, imagine this. Imagine in the early days of the internet, you would be telling the exact story that you now told me.
Right.
Like, hey, I can sit in my underwear and I can book an apartment 8 months into the future. The person in the 90s that you told this to would be like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, right.
What kind of use case is this? Like, you're sitting in a fantasy bubble.
Yeah.
And that's the great thing with technology. You can't really foresee where it will go, but you can envision which parts of a human's life that technology might change. And And to come back to virtual reality, the part that I believe will be changed most by things like virtual reality is making a connection across continents. There's a very specific magic in sitting with somebody or sharing a space with somebody in virtual reality. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of virtual reality experiences that were mind-blowing, that are very, very much stuck in my head as proper memories of me being in a different place. But the strongest ones are where I share that place with somebody else. And especially if that other person is somewhere else in the world, maybe they're in lockdown, maybe not. Mm-hmm. It's a crazy feeling of having that presence with somebody in a virtual world. And so I have no idea, to come back to this whole technological revelation, I have no idea what those social interactions will look like in 20 years.
Yeah.
But because they already match at this low fidelity, low resolution, jittery kind of experience that you sometimes get in modern virtual reality social mm-hmm. experiences. You can still, like, if you see past that, there's a whole generation of people that might connect with friends over distances and create memories together that might almost be as strong as the memories they create in the real world. Because, like I said, some of the social experiences that I had, they created memories in my brain. I have mm-hmm. the memory of playing ping pong with my friend Dan from Amsterdam while I was still in Germany.
Yeah.
I have social memories of this year, because of lockdown, obviously. I spent New Year's Eve in a virtual reality concert with my girlfriend. And it was just crazy. Like, it was one of the most memorable New Year's Eves of my whole life. Like mm-hmm. of 36 years of New Year's Eves. Like, it was a very special occasion. And yeah. It was weird and it was funny. And we met some, well, they must have been teenagers or kids talking about very sexual stuff that we shouldn't even be talking about, but they for sure shouldn't be talking about.
Okay.
And it was, yeah, it's weird and it's funny and it's completely different. Mm. And that's also why if you're an early adopter in a technology or an early believer in a technology, don't get yourself distracted by people who just don't get it. Because oftentimes they don't get it because it doesn't impact their life. They cannot see or envision how that will change their lives. And I swear to God, in 20 years, virtual reality headsets will be so small that you can pop it on a grandma's head and she can hang out with her kids. And then people get it. Only then people get it. You know, if I talk about weird furries in New Year's Eve on a concert where people talked about weird sexual stuff, that you cannot explain anybody. Just like you cannot explain, I'm sitting in my underpants, booking an apartment 8 months into the future. That's just something that the normal everyday person can't relate to, but at some point they will get it. Mm-hmm. And here's me say, well, virtual reality is already there. I believe like most people get it now. That was completely different when I started in 2012. Like could just explaining virtual reality to somebody was completely impossible. Like, how do you explain? Now people kind of understand, okay, it's virtual reality. They kind of get what to do with it, but the application isn't yet there. And for me, that killer application is once you put it on your grandma's head and she can hang out with her grandchildren. That's kind of, for me, is the threshold where. And here's another funny thing about technology. Once it has reached that stage, people just take it as normal, as a thing of everyday life. And that was, especially for me, was crazy to see, because you mentioned this. I started a company in virtual reality in Silicon Valley. And this was in 2016. And the hype, you cannot imagine the hype. Like, Google was throwing money at it. Facebook was throwing money at it. Microsoft was throwing money. Like, everybody was throwing money at this thing. And they still do. Like, Facebook is a great example. They invest more money now than they ever invested before into virtual reality, because they see the traction and they have the data, blah, blah. But after that big hype was over, like nobody talked about virtual reality anymore, because it is in this early adopter phase where, I mean, it's there and it's kind of cool, but it's not hypey anymore. It's not the new big thing. And so people stop talking about it a little bit. So in the years 2018 to 2019, virtual reality, it felt a little bit like it was not gone, but it was definitely simmering at a very, very small flame.
Yeah.
And now in 2021, with games like Half-Life Alyx being out and Beat Saber being a crazy success across the board, now we're in this like past early adopter phase where we're slowly entering the mainstream. And once in 10, 20 years, once you have slim devices that everybody can use, then you're suddenly talking about a technology that's just there. And that's when the market is really where, well, everybody was foreseeing it, but it just takes a long time. And I mean, maybe this is anecdotal, but I very much believed in virtual reality technology. I still do. And it really helped me create a career for myself in a field that I'm passionate about, with people that are, in my mind, geniuses. So maybe this is something that your podcast listeners can take away from this, is from my ramble about technology, is stick with it. If you're actually passionate about it and somebody tells you that doesn't make any sense, you might actually be onto something.
Yeah, and this is the reason I always love to have guests on, and they allow them to bring a topic to the show, because how could I have ever planned this? I could have never planned this and said, like, and he will go into a rant about technology and he will inspire people and stuff. I can't write this stuff, So I always love having guests on and letting them bring the topic here, to have great conversations like this and to learn more about what people really care about. And you said your career is a great keyword for a segue. And you already mentioned it. Let's start with how we met at through journalism, basically. I was an intern, and you were an editor, right? And also a writer for the gaming news site, Cyanide back then. Yeah.
Correct.
And what do you think about the state of journalism, of gaming journalism right now?
Oh, whoa, that's a big question, which I love to answer. I mean, I feel there was a lot of teething problems going on. I mean, Gamergate is one of these big topics where the way gaming journalism and games in general depicted certain minorities. Well, wait a second. Now I'm getting myself into trouble here. Certain groups of humans, let's just call it very generic. Like those things need to happen, because you remember that was a big blast and everybody was like, oh my God, games journalism is going down the drain. It's like, it's over.
Yeah.
It's horrible, blah, blah. And we cannot support this. But I believe it's growing up really. It's maturing, and it's putting a spotlight onto some of the things that aren't really great in the industry that we're working in. And I feel like that's actually the last 10 years since we worked together. That's been a continuous topic in games journalism. Games, when we worked at Computech in 2011, games already, so the games medium itself, the pure gameplay and the stories, the narratives that games were telling, they had already started to mature to a certain point, right? So the kind of stories that were told in 2010, 2011, 2012, they started to become more mature from the, gamey, arcadey, rescue the princess kind of thing that we had before that. But I felt that games journalism hadn't quite caught up to that. So I feel that games journalism back then was still kind of a little bit stuck in this old mentality of Tomb Raider boobs and I don't know. And I'm not downplaying here. This is a very, very broad generalization. Obviously, there were already back then great pieces of mature content, dissections of games franchises and their underlying, meta narrative. That all existed in 2011. But you could also make a ton of clicks by just filming the sex scene in the new God of War, putting it on, getting a link on Kotaku, and having like one of the best days of your life in terms of in terms of numbers on your page.
Right, yeah.
And games journalism with Gamergate, and also with the reportings about crunch in the industry, that's kind of the follow up for me in this whole like train of maturing.
Yeah. Those
things helped, in my opinion, to put games journalism a little bit in like a higher value. I don't know, like the kind of stuff, maybe an example is best. The kind of stuff that I consume today, media about games, is mostly long form kind of stuff. So I love Noah Caldwell-Gervais as YouTube channel. He does like hour-long retrospectives about game franchises. He has and I highly recommend listening to that. If you're a fan of Red Dead Redemption and you've played the games, listen to his 4-hour dissection of Red Dead Redemption, its story arc, its intricacies, its character development. He's great. And I like, that's 4 hours of your life. When we started working in 2011, we always cut our podcast short at like an hour or sometimes 1.5 hours, but we always try to do less than that. We always try to be like half an hour, 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And now, no problem. 4 hours, sure, I'll watch that because it's well researched, and it reflects on the tropes, and it reflects on the stereotypes, and so I feel games journalism in general has matured a lot in that regard.
Right.
And so I think it's to answer your original question, I think it's in a much better place than it was 10 years ago. Also because 10 years ago, people were just still switching from print to online. Right, and that shift hurt the games industry, the games journalism industry a lot. Like all the old monetization schemes were gone, and suddenly you have to do like clickbaity, quick articles, get as many links and traffic as possible. It was a large shift. But now that people understand, hey, how can we actually monetize this new world? There's a lot happening on Patreon. I mean, YouTube has been a huge influence in it. I mean, you can say it's positive or a negative influence, but it's brought many more eyeballs on games of people that don't actually enjoy playing games, but they enjoy they enjoy watching other people playing games. And so, yeah, I feel games journalism is in a great spot, and the games industry in particular. I mean, there's so many great games coming out, from indies to hardcore high-end games. And the other topic that I suggested for this was Valheim, which is a super indie game made by a 5-people studio somewhere in Sweden. It's a Viking survival game. It's like Minecraft meets Vikings, more or less. And it's freaking amazing. Like, it's so good. I can't even say how many hours I've played of that game. And it's funny because it's one of the only games that's really, for at least 5 years or even a decade, where I have this feeling of, oh my God, can work be over soon so I can go home and play Valheim with my friends.
Oh yeah. Awesome,
and from those indie games to AAA games, there's so much good content out there, and I feel that it's just getting better. I feel the people who are writing video games are getting better. The people who are creating 3D assets for video games are getting better. And a great example for that is another, what I consider a AAA game is Half-Life Alyx. You can see how much Valve learned over the years, how much better game developers they became, and how they're so good at game development that they can even take a relatively new medium like virtual reality, which, granted, they are very invested in, and they helped create this modern surge of virtual reality. But it's still kind of like uncharted territory, unproven methods. What is fun? How much zombies can you have jump in your face until it's not fun anymore? And all of these things, they had to essentially, create and make and test and prototype and put playtesters on. And Half-Life Alyx is like one of these games that for years to come will be a beacon for what virtual reality games can look like, and also a northern star for the quality of games that Valve can still deliver, which for me is a huge one. I mean, I'm a huge Valve fan.
Yeah. And you just mentioned Gamergate, and I think it's important for me to just take a moment here and also say that, like, the attentions might have been the ones you said, but I just want to make it very clear that I condemn every action taken by Gamergate against people of color and harassment of female game employers or something, or people in the media, which I think is also noteworthy, and I think you should all check up upon that. And I think this is always very important to keep in mind. So
absolutely,
don't think about it. I'm sort of like sort of trying to trivialize this harassment of these people. I take it very seriously, and I'm condemning all these actions very harshly.
And the whole industry really should. It's a tough topic because you're still kind of tiptoeing around it, right? Because it's got all these notions of either you're for those discriminated minorities, or you're like, you want them, whatever you want, witch hunts on them. So this is one of those topics where it feels like you can't take a stance in the middle. Either you're on one side or you're completely on the other side. And then what you saw with Gamergate was those two parties hit on the internet, and it just gets very ugly. But the core underlying mentality of that movement to give these people that are often unheard a voice and make put the pains that they had to go through in the public face and shout about it. And that's what caught me off guard with Gamergate, was like how loud it was. Like, it was everywhere. But this is something, this is something that I've also learned over the course of my life, is if you want things to change and you think you can actually change them, you're not fighting windmills, then you need to shout extra loud to be the first person that's heard. Just like vegetarians and vegans back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, like, they were freaking annoying because they were talking all the time about how bad of a person you are because you're eating animals. Now I'm a vegetarian, and I'm like, that's just the way it goes. Like, for me, it's a natural, logical kind of thing. Like, we're using too much energy. We can't keep holding these animals like that. I'm just not going to eat meat. Right? Mm-hmm. So their annoying shouting led to the society talking about these topics, getting eyeballs on the topic, everybody thinking about, hey, actually, where do I take my stance on this spectrum of things? And so it brings me back to another passionate topic. If you're passionate about something that something wrong that you see out there in the world, sometimes you have to be the annoying shouting person. And there are many ways of getting there, but I don't think a social revolution has ever taken place by people quietly talking among each other. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
So Gamergate, to go back to the topic, it was loud, and it was like, holy, what is going on here? But in its core, and this is like, I never engaged in any of those discussions because it was just too confrontational for me. Those two sides shouting at each other. But what this whole thing did with me is, like, I thought about, hey, what can I do, for example, to give these unheard voices a voice in the virtual reality industry, for example. So this must have been just around the same time, like 2015, 2016, when the virtual reality industry was just taking off. There were huge discussions about how to make sure that we're getting a diverse industry. We're bringing in people of color, people of minorities, females, males. I guess, like, get a diverse set of people, because I believe something's a little bit lopsided, not necessarily wrong, but lopsided if an industry is predominantly male or predominantly female. Right, because it just doesn't make sense. Because if you look at the globe, we're like almost 50-50, right? Like, it's 50% females, 50% males, and we're gender fluid these days, so I don't want to like generalize, right? Like there's also other people that aren't. But if you just look at pure statistics, something must be wrong if that statistic doesn't come through to an industry, because every industry has multiple facets of different positions. Yeah, but anyway, it made me think. And so the people who have been shouting back then, they definitely reached something, even with me, that I treaded around the topic carefully. I only thought, okay, there must be something on it. And then I asked a couple of female friends of mine, like, hey, what can I do to make you guys feel more accepted in the virtual reality world? How can we make sure that, and then we talked about like speakers and panels but and this is complicated because you also don't want to give somebody a speaker position because they're female. That doesn't make any sense. You want to have them because they're doing great work. And that's what you should tell people. Like, don't be like, hey, shit, we need to be more diverse. We need somebody that's female. No, actually think the other way. Think about, hey, who are the best people that I can get there? And very often that is 50-50. Like there's not a big bias in that.
Right.
Yeah, social justice is another topic that I didn't really think we were talking about, but it's a very, very interesting one. And I mean, things need to change. Like that's definitely true. And that fight has to be going on. And yeah, we as men also have to take our part. And so if somebody's listening to this and's got some great ideas for me, how I can help in virtual reality or in digital entertainment, then please reach out to me. I'm very, very visible on the internet. I'm always keen to learn about, how to make the world a fairer place.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there is a point to you like saying that you shouldn't always put a person of color or female onto a pedestal or something. But I think, like, at least for me, I think those are the stories I actually right now care the most about, because right now I'm doing research on like finding somebody who's a voice actress and also who's Black or African American, and I'm just doing research and like I can't find almost anyone. Like the few I found are Hollywood exclusive, and I will never, or maybe not right now, not never, but maybe not right now, be able to reach them. And most of the Black protagonists are being portrayed or being played or voiced, to be more specific, by white persons. Yes. So I'm just like, well, this is like, this brought me like this, it sort of made me aware of like this whole bigger issue of like, well, I want to hear these stories as well. I want to hear what it's like to be a person of color working in the voice acting industry, for example. But I'm currently right now able to find out who I could even get. And I mean, from one side, yes, I agree. You say, well, I shouldn't invite her just because of that. But on the other hand, I'm like, well, I never heard a podcast with someone like that. I would love to hear her story. So yeah, it's always like a big of a like this or that. But I think I'm just going to do what I want, and I think those are the stories I care right now the most. From something that actually I would like to hear on a different show. So I guess I have to step up and do it myself. But, that actually brings me to a great virtual reality experience that this must have also been years ago, but it was very basic. It's an empathy demo, more or less. So you go into a virtual reality world, there's a mirror, and you're embodying a female, for example, or you're embodying a Black person, or you're embodying a short person or a tall person, right? And because you have a mirror in front of you and the avatar mimics your movements, your brain pretty much instantly goes, yeah, well, this is me. It's a mirror. It does the same thing as me. So this is what I look like. It's a very weird thing to describe, but it's essentially embodiment. And that for me that brought me onto a trail of research into embodiment studies. And one of the most mind-blowing ones that I've ever seen studies done in virtual reality was how do you best explain this? So they took patients, or they took participants in that study, and at first they measured their
their discrimination and how many stereotypes they had and how racist they were essentially. So they asked them a couple of questions and essentially gave them a rating on, and this is very basically spoken. Like, I'm more than happy to send you the link so you can put it somewhere for people to read up on this. Yeah. But, what transcended with that is that they essentially gave people a rating of how discriminating they are, how racist they are, how many stereotypes they have. And then they put them into a virtual reality experience of a black person, for example. Just a general, and it's nothing special. It's just you embody a black person. You look at your hands and you have black hands, right? Yeah. And a person comes towards you and talks to you like a black person. And so suddenly you embody a black person. And lo and behold, after they put people through that virtual reality experience and compared it with a control group that did not get the virtual reality experience, people are suddenly more empathetic towards people of color. They have less incentive to show racist or racist tendencies or stereotypes. So and it's pretty logical. If you have been in somebody's shoes, you will understand how they see the world instinctively, right? I can read hundreds of stories about people of color and discrimination and racism, and it will make me understand the concept on a conceptual level, right? Like I get it, but feeling it is a whole different thing. And that's one of those things that virtual reality is extremely powerful in, is making you feel like you're in somebody else's shoes or feel like you're transported to a different world. And so that for me was one of the most inspiring things I ever saw. And virtual reality has plenty of these use cases. I'm not sure if you saw my TEDx talk that I did in 2017. I pulled a lot of other very positive examples of virtual reality technology. So how it can make you, how it can prepare you for your future, how it can make you healthier, how even virtual reality helps to some quadriplegics to get lower body control back, essentially helping them walking again, which is insane. But it's just one of those examples where virtual reality technology, yeah, sure, you can shoot zombies in the head and you can be Alex and fight yourself through City 17. I almost did a fat spoiler there, so I had to catch myself. Go through City 17 and you can do all those things, right? You can play games and you can travel to the world, but you actually have applications of virtual reality that can fundamentally change a person's life. And that for me is the power of technology. And that's why I'm still very much on the hype train. Even now in 2021, I'm still hyped.
Yeah, and moving on, and then we both sort of parted ways through journalism, and then you went to Rockstar Games to see more of the PR side of games media and the games industry. So, well, like you already mentioned Valve, but Rockstar Games almost invokes the same mystique when it comes to working there. And, the work practices have been exposed here and there from the development side, speaking of crunch. But, what was it like working for Rockstar Games? Is it are they doing something vastly different from your eyes that is truly unique to them? Or is it just the whole mysterious part and they're just really, really good at what they're doing? So it creates this sort of legend status.
Tricky question. I obviously can't talk about all the things that happened at Rockstar Games because I'm under NDA, but I'm more than happy to talk about the first question you asked me is what was working at Rockstar Games like? It was fucking amazing. Excuse my French, but it was, it's Rockstar Games. So everybody who works in the games industry knows that they are up there, right? So having the opportunity and getting the chance to work for them and work on products like GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2 before it was called Red Dead Redemption 2, it's pretty mind blowing. If you're a fanboy, and I'm a huge Rockstar fanboy, not fanboy. I haven't played all of their games religiously, but I think they're one of the great studios out there. And so it was a huge opportunity for me, and I loved working there. The colleagues I had in the German office were absolutely amazing. So if anyone's listening, Setchkin, Jochen, Michael, if you're listening, then this is so weird saying that in German. Michael, Michi, hi Michi. Michi, if you're listening, it was great working with you. And like I said, we worked on some amazing products, and it was a great learning period of my life. It very much overlapped with my journey in virtual reality. So this is something that I like. Rockstar Games brought a virtual reality game very early in the virtual reality cycle, LA Noire VR. And when I was working at Rockstar Games is a very secretive company. So they are very, they're almost paranoid about information leaking.
Yeah.
And me being this huge virtual reality nerd, I was just trying to find out whether Rockstar Games is working on anything. But even I was then surprised by LA Noire. So even we in the marketing department, like it's not like everything that's going on at the higher ranks of Rockstar Games.
Right. Yeah.
And as you probably know, those higher ranks when I was working there it's essentially Sam Hauser and Dan Hauser. So the two brothers who were the leaders of Rockstar Games, they just have, and this trickles down through the whole company. They have an insane, amazing, outstanding level of perfectionism, of quality. Some of the trailers that we got from HQ, right? They were ready to send out. They were pulled back at last minute because they changed this 2-frame segment of the trailer, right?
Wow.
Because they literally have such an ambitious vision of what their games should be, that they don't settle for like a half quality kind of. They're very much perfectionists, and you can see that in the games. I mean, GTA 5 must be one of the games with the most little details that nobody ever sees. Right? There's so many details in the world of GTA 5 that maybe 5 people in the whole world have actually seen. Right? Because they're so hidden and so minuscule that you actually have to, like, you know what I mean? And so, I'm very much the same. So I'm also very much a perfectionist. I love to deliver results that are great. I'd rather take a little bit longer and push a deadline than bring something that I feel is subpar to what I could have done if I only had more time. And that is something that I really value and that I regard very highly from Rockstar Games, as they have this insane amount of quality control, perfectionism. And I can't wait for their next game. I hope it's Max Payne 4.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
I really hope it's Max Payne 4, but probably not.
Did you enjoy Red Dead Redemption 2?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. How can you not? It's yeah. I mean, it's actually hard to put in words how much I loved Red Dead Redemption 2. And here's the fucked up thing. I can't tell you what the spoiler was, but Red Dead Redemption 2, it was obvious that people would be out on the internet and spoil everything, right? They would go out and spoil. And so I couldn't play Red Dead Redemption 2 when it came out because I was busy with work, or I didn't have a TV or whatever. I can't remember. But I knew that there was about a stretch of 3 weeks that I had to go through, like, reading Reddit, but not actually finding any spoilers about Red Dead Redemption. So I actually programmed a little filter to filter everything out. Red Dead 2, Red Dead Redemption, everything, right?
Okay.
And then at some point, this damn Reddit user had, his username was the spoiler.
Wow. Dedication and...
Yeah, for those of you who've played Red Dead Redemption 2, you know what that spoiler is, right?
Right.
Somebody dies. Let's just say that. Somebody dies. And...
Well,
having that, so I played Red Dead Redemption 2 knowing that that particular person will die. So I'm like, what the hell? It's like the whole game was spoiled. But funny enough, and this really shows the magic of, and people who play it the second time will have the same thing. They have the information about that person dying, and then playing that game is almost melancholic, almost reminiscent of
the older times, right?
Of the older times, and also the way you are attached to that character is suddenly completely different because you know what will happen to them. And so like it's just, anyway, so they managed for me to enjoy the game thoroughly, even though I had the most major spoiler of all spoilers of that game. And that really shows how good of a game development studio they are.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe there's some form of consolation for you. It is Red Dead Redemption 1. I got spoiled with that. This was during my time when I was in China, and I came back and I waited long and I escaped the moment. Friends of mine talked on TeamSpeak back then, talked about the game. I left the channel and everything, and then I came back, started playing, and then I went to a friend, watching a movie or something, and then he was like, can you please open like my back in the day MSN Messenger? And I was like, no, I don't want to. And he was like, oh, come on, please open it up. And it was just like rest in peace, somebody. I'm just like, there was no like hi, like, oh, I just finished it. It was just like rest in peace, somebody.
Yeah,
and I'm just like, no.
Some people really enjoy spoiling stuff. I never got that. But one of my favorite spoilers was, did you ever watch Fight Club?
I watched it. Yeah, right.
Okay, so, and Fight Club's so old that we can probably spoil this, but my girlfriend at the time, this was ages ago, 15 years ago, when the movie was like kind of new. We were talking about like twists in movies. Yeah. And she was like, yeah, it's like that twist in Fight Club where you learn that they're the same person. And I'm like, I haven't seen the movie yet. Thanks for spoiling it.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's a great twist. I mean, that's one of the greatest twists in entertainment history, is like, two people are the same. That's insane.
Well, funny enough, the TV show Scrubs, there was like a whole episode of like, I think one of the doctors, Dr. Cox, spoiling the janitor the ending of The Sixth Sense, and the entire episode was about this.
I remember that one.
And I haven't seen it. I haven't seen the movie. I'm just like, well, I'm now screwed as well. Thanks for that. So, and I haven't seen the movie because I was like, it's done. I can't watch it.
I mean, Sixth Sense is one of the most spectacular twists in a movie, for sure. You just don't see it coming at all.
Exactly.
I saw the twist. I saw the twist of Half-Life Alyx coming.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'm still.
Have you played it?
No, I think a friend of mine is going to send me his VR kit. It's an HTC Vive. Ooh. So but maybe speaking of that, what kind of VR headset would you recommend people these days?
Oh, this is a loaded question. I mean, from a technical and price perspective, it's an Oculus Quest 2. There's not really any competition out there in terms of price or technical features. Yeah. It's an amazing device. I mean, right out straight on amazing. It's really good. I have a hard time, and I find myself doing that more and more. I just don't agree with Facebook's business methods anymore at all. And it's a long story. I mean, I joined Facebook 2008.
Yes.
And it was great. Like, it was great. You could connect with your friends and it was all fun and games. But they just, and even back then you knew that they were just harvesting your data and selling it to somebody. And like all of that was pretty clear even in 2013, 2014, 2015, right? So when Facebook bought Oculus in 2014 for $2 billion, people were torn. And I was also torn. I was like, I don't want this to go to Facebook. But then at the same time, I thought, well, it's a great development for virtual reality because these guys have deep pockets and they can just bankroll lots of technical developments that need to happen for VR to become a thing.
Well, I think you wrote back then about this, and you said, well, it's sort of like legitimized VR because like a big player is now standing behind it.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I mean, the only thing that irks me a little bit is over the years they have shown that they don't really have good OPSEC, operational security, when it comes to securing your data. I mean, Cambridge Analytica is, many people hate you bringing up that word because it's like, oh my God, somebody's going to talk about Cambridge Analytica. But in a nutshell, it's fucking devastating. Like, it was really bad. Right. They literally influenced democracies across the globe with data they harvested. Yeah. And they also didn't do a good job at recapping what happened and what they're going to change with that. And Cambridge Analytica was just one of these things that kept happening. And then, to be honest, like, maybe this is a bad thing to say, but if I see Mark Zuckerberg, he doesn't seem like somebody I would, like, I don't have any kids, but but if I had kids, I wouldn't give it to him. He's just a little bit off. Something's not quite right with the guy. And this is like I said, maybe this is bad, but that's just the impression that I get is from how he behaves and his mannerisms and the stuff that he says. It just doesn't feel like somebody that I would want to hang out and have a beer with, right? It's just not that kind of guy. Like, I would love to have a conversation with him, but I would never want to be friends with the guy. Whereas other people, and obviously this is just the image that they create from them, but I would love to go out with Elon Musk and have a beer, or with Tim Cook, or with any other tech CEO than Mark Zuckerberg. Right, it's just, he gives me the creeps. And I never really had this before. I always thought, well, that's a weird nerd. But now that they have dirt in their history books, Cambridge Analytica, selling user data, not giving a fuck about competitors, buying companies and outright demolishing them. And in virtual reality, they have a huge track record, a huge dirty track record of blocking like indie developers' apps from the store and then outright copy them. One-to-one copy. And the most prominent example of this is a fitness app that a company called YUR made. And what they did is they took the sensor data of your Oculus Quest. So whatever game you were playing, right? Whether that's Beat Saber or Half-Life or whatever it is, they would take the sensor data and they would guess how many calories you burned. Mm-hmm. They would, from up and down movements, when you're crouching, getting up, crouching, getting up, yeah. They would measure which parts of and they would make an estimate. Yeah. And then they had data from the lab that they correlated and looked, okay, this is the right data. You know what Facebook did? They blocked them 4 or 5 times. And with blocking, I mean, they introduced code that they would not have otherwise needed to specifically block that developer's app.
Oh, wow.
Guess what? A month later, they come out with Oculus Fitness or whatever, Oculus Move, I think it's called, which does the exact same thing.
Wow. Okay.
And so here's the thing. If you were like a good kind of fair player, if you were a fair player, you'd be like, look at these guys. They're making an app that many people are using and that actually benefits the users because they're getting it. Let's get that and make a better application out of that. That would have been, kind of a sneaky move, but totally fine, right? If you see somebody selling hot dogs on a corner, everybody loves the hot dogs, you're going to put up a hot dog stand right next to them. Yeah, right. But you know what's shitty is taking that other hot dog guy's stand, untwisting some screws on the wheel, putting some vinegar into the hot dogs or some more nasty stuff to block that competitor. And then once he's not able to sell his hot dogs anymore, then you go and put up a hot dog stand there. Yeah, right. And that for me is not entrepreneurialism anymore. Mm-hmm. Or what an entrepreneurship, that's like purely evil capitalist. Yeah, right. And that's exactly what Facebook's doing. And so, sorry for this long answer to a short question. I can highly recommend the Quest 2, but know that you're selling your soul to a company that, in my opinion, has way too much dirt in their history to be trusted with essentially cameras that look at your room all the time.
Sure. And is there, maybe we can try to shorten it a bit. Is there a number 2? Maybe if somebody says, well, this sounds pretty awful, maybe I'm going to go for the next best one.
If you're a PC player, check out the HP Reverb G2. That's an amazing headset, super crystal clear, even better than better visuals than the Quest, than the Quest 2. But it's a PC VR only headset, so you won't get the benefits of having a mobile headset that you can also link to your PC. If you have more money than that and you want to go like the best, most immersive experience, there is nothing but the Valve Index. Okay. It's super expensive, but it is absolutely the best headset you can buy at the moment. It's crazy immersive. Like if you are playing Half-Life Alyx or you're a Half-Life fan, you're like, I'm going to get a VR headset, get an Index, maybe resell it afterwards. Even if it costs you like €100 for that transaction, it's totally worth it. Like playing a game that was made by a studio that also makes the hardware is a magical experience. It's kind of like, and I'm quoting
Nintendo, right?
Exactly. I'm quoting Gabe Newell here. It's a Nintendo play. That's what they are aiming for, is they want to make the hardware and they want to make the games that use that hardware to the fullest extent. And so that is if you're going for PC VR. Unfortunately, on the mobile side, there aren't many great alternatives at the moment. The whole industry is kind of waiting for HTC to announce their next headset, which is supposedly a mobile headset like the Quest.
Right.
And we're also waiting on, there's a couple of Chinese headsets that are very promising, which are essentially built on the same tech stack as Oculus Quest 2. So they use the same main processor and GPU, and it's obviously they don't have it's a system on a chip called the Snapdragon XR2. And that will be in most mobile headsets coming in 2021 and 2022. Mm-hmm. So on the mobile side, it's a little bit of a hard one. But if you don't want to go with that, go for a HP Reverb, get a PC, or even a PlayStation VR. Like, even though it's very, very old technology at this point, it gives you some really fun experiences. Like Resident Evil 5 in VR you've never played a Resident Evil like that.
Yeah, Astrobot's also very
crazy.
Good.
Astrobot's super, super fun.
Yeah,
that's
and they're also, and I mean they just announced the second generation of like their headset. So maybe people can wait for that. But speaking of VR, we tiptoed around this topic long enough. I want to hear more about your journey into VR and maybe more about the current where you're currently working, Eden especially.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, we talked a lot about social justice and stuff like that. But it was very, very, very interesting. I hope people can take away a little bit from that. But my journey in virtual reality. Back in the days, I was still working at Computech, and a small company from the United States had a Kickstarter for a virtual reality headset. And that Kickstarter was Oculus, and the headset was the Rift. And back then at Gamescom 2012, I had the chance to try an early prototype of the Oculus Rift, which back then was was literally held together with duct tape. It was a screen that was glued to a pair of ski goggles and essentially glued some sensors on top of that. And the game that I was playing is something that never released. It's the Doom 3 port from John Carmack. So I was standing there in a hotel suite in Cologne. And that meeting literally changed my life. I mean, I had read up a lot on virtual reality. I thought, wow, this Kickstarter is crazy. There were a couple of big names from the industry in that Kickstarter video. There was Gabe Newell, Michael Abrash, Cliff Bleszinski. They were all saying that virtual reality is going to come and Paul Malucki, the founder of Oculus, is going to make it. And so when Paul showed me his prototype, my expectations were already very high. Mm-hmm. Like there's John Carmack, right? Like John Carmack talking about virtual reality as if it's the next big thing. Like you can't get any more hype than that as a games fan.
Yeah.
So my expectations were sky high and they were literally blown out of the water. Like I could not believe what just happened. I still remember immediately after that, I called my girlfriend at the time and I told her, what I just saw will change the world. Like coming back to the technical revelation. And that's how I started in virtual reality. I immediately became a believer, and the experience back then, it was compared to today's standards, which is only 5 years later. It's not even a decade later. It was ultra bad. Like ultra low resolution, no positional tracking, no hand controllers. It was all just a glimpse of how it could be. But I saw, okay, if they change this and if it gets a bit smaller and it gets a bit lighter and there's some cool games for it, this will become a big hit. And I did a lot of things on the side. So I was still working at Computech, and I had just started my job at Rockstar Games when I started a community on meetup.com, the virtual reality Germany meetup community, and organized the Munich meetup myself. You know, I was just like, how can I get more people interested in this? How can I get more developers know about this? What can I do from my perspective, with my small, with the small tools that I have to reach as many people and tell them about this technical revelation that's coming? How can I get more developers to make games for this, right? So I thought, well, virtual reality need to be experienced. So I made a real world meetup group. But I also helped start the Oculus community on reddit.com, which back then was a couple hundred nerds talking about like Skyrim in VR. That was one of the big topics, was like, imagine Skyrim in VR.
Right.
And now that community, and I'm very, very proud of that, is the largest unofficial community for virtual reality on the internet with, I haven't checked lately, but I think 350,000 members.
Crazy.
And millions of page views every month. So it's a huge community. It's one of the opinion drivers on the internet when it comes to virtual reality. And back then when I started that, I was like, okay, well, virtual reality needs to have some kind of community on Reddit, because even back then Reddit was a traffic powerhouse, like insane amounts of traffic. If a topic has a thriving community on Reddit, it will have a thriving future. That was kind of my logic. So I moderated, and I was the guy that put by far the most submissions into the subreddit. So essentially what I wanted to create was a central point for everything all virtual reality news. Mm-hmm. So that whatever happened on the internet, you could just go on the Oculus subreddit and you can read about it. And so what I did is I collected everything from the internet, which was back then was like distributed in obscure forums and Twitter accounts. And like you really had to search for information about virtual reality. And so every time something happened, I was searching for it anyway, because I was so interested in the topic. I just did a quick, copy paste into the Oculus subreddit, and here we go. And I wanted to establish that central news source, and it is still that. And I'm very, very proud of that. Others also helped. So this was not only this was a big team that worked on that. Mm-hmm. But now if you want news about virtual reality and about Oculus in particular, you go on oculus.com. You go on reddit.com/r/Oculus. And you will find deep discussions and funny memes and lots of pictures of boxes, because for some reason people love to post their pictures of boxes and they always get upvoted. Who knows why and who knows what, but it happens. Anyway, so I did all of these things on the side, like just being passionate about the technology and thinking like, how can I get the word out of this thing to come? And that naturally led me to getting in talks with many experts from the German VR industry.
Right.
And with two of those experts, I started a virtual reality company called realities.io that we founded in Silicon Valley. So we, three dudes from Germany, we went to Silicon Valley, we raised $1 million, and it was all a blur. Like it was in 2016 when the hype was at its max, and you could literally go out with a team, a good idea and a prototype and raise $1 million. That's what we did. And before that happened, I had to make the decision whether I should quit at Rockstar Games. And here's me, being 32 years old, always having wanted to work at Rockstar Games someday. Yeah. Thinking about, can I quit this job to earn nothing and go to Silicon Valley for a dream? And in the end, it all turned out well, because when we came back from Silicon Valley, I got an offer from Nvidia to fill their role as their European virtual reality guy, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so in the end, it all turned out super nice, and we had good experiences in Silicon Valley, and the company's still going strong. We parted ways, and obviously there was a little bit of fallout when we were parting ways, but now we're all good. They're still going strong. They set up shop in Berlin, and they're making amazing photogrammetry experiences. So if you want to travel the world in virtual reality at a photorealistic level, check out Realities. It's photorealism as the word describes it, I would say. Mm-hmm. But yeah, after that, I started working at Nvidia, and my role there was head of virtual reality for Europe, Middle East, Africa, and India. And we did a lot of things, from business development, so talking to big companies, big corporations like Volkswagen, like Mercedes, what was the other big one that we worked with? Lots of car manufacturers, because obviously displaying cars in virtual reality is great. Mm-hmm. But we essentially did business development where we tried to get Volkswagen, for example, interested in virtual reality technology. And because Nvidia was then and still is the best GPU manufacturer for virtual reality applications, if Volkswagen jumps onto virtual reality, they will automatically buy Nvidia GPUs. So my role was not to, indirectly it was, but I didn't need to go out and sell GPUs. I could sell virtual reality, and in turn, if somebody put money into virtual reality, they would automatically put money into Nvidia. And so it was a great job, and it made me travel the world. I went to 52 or 55 different events in those 2 years that I worked there. So I traveled to Eastern Europe, to the Middle East, to the States. I spoke on stages from like 5 people to 5,000 people at my TEDx talk in Brussels. Mm-hmm. It was great. Like it was definitely one of the greatest experiences in my life, that whole first stretch of years in virtual reality. And it still is amazing. Like this is the crazy thing. It still is a thriving dynamic industry. Unfortunately, we couldn't go to any events, obviously, but once those events are coming back, I'm really looking forward to shaking a lot of hands of friends, because I made a lot of friends in those years in virtual reality, traveling so much, and essentially putting Nvidia on the table of the European virtual reality industry, to make sure that the VR industry also understands that. And I'm really, this is a personal opinion, but don't buy an AMD GPU if you want to do VR. Like there is a reason why Nvidia is ruling that field, and why they have like a 90% market share in virtual reality ready PCs. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was great as well. At some point, well, to make a long story short, I realized corporate it isn't really my thing. I can see a lot of people thriving in a corporate environment where everything's really structured, and you don't need to think a lot. Everything's like kind of comes in bite-sized pieces, and you just have to execute whatever your manager puts on your table. Yeah. I simply don't work like that. My brain's way more strategic and long-term planning and going into the nitty-gritty details of a plan. And I'm also a great executor, but only if I can strategize the execution part of that. And that's really where my strengths lie. And that really comes to fruition at Eden now, where we're a small team of extremely talented people that from our CTO, who's been working with tech for almost his whole life, which is funny because he grew up on a farm, and now he's doing 3D modeling and VR, robotics and mechatronics. He's freaking amazing. To our CEO, who's like a seasoned entrepreneur. He's run companies for 25, super successful companies for 25 years. To our head of content, Maxine, she's awesome. She's making She's curating content at the moment, virtual reality content that is absolutely inspirational. And one of the projects that she's done is a project for kids in hospitals. So right now during COVID, those kids can't leave the hospital and they also can't get a lot of visits, obviously, because of the health regulations. And so virtual reality for those kids is an opportunity to escape their, often very dire situations, at least virtually for a little time, for a small amount of time. And Maxine, our head of content, she's done amazing curation. She's allowed those kids to dive with dolphins, to go to Disney World, to, do things that kids usually do, but they can't because they are bound to a hospital bed, essentially. That's also another one of these great examples of use cases for virtual reality. That's really awesome. But long story short, the team that I work with there is amazing. And we're on a journey and on a mission to make virtual reality easier. Because as much as I love the technology, it needs to have, and this is a nice closing the circle to the beginning of this podcast, it needs to have this iPhone moment. Where you're taking it in your hand or you're putting it on your face and it just works. And you're like, wow, this is intuitive and it's easy and it's light and it's cool. We're still not quite there. The experiences you can have are freaking amazing, but you have to put up base stations and you have to strap controllers to your hands and, all those things, and you have to set up drivers, and it's still way too complicated. And Eden, we're on a mission. We're creating a product called Eden Snacker, which essentially solves all of these problems. It's a VR system that everyone can use. And I know I'm sounding like a marketing person, but I've actually tried this out. The first 2 people that I demoed Eden Snacker to were my parents, and they're 67 and 70 years old respectively. And I put the device in front of them and I gave them zero explanation. I did not tell them what it is. Obviously, they knew it's a virtual reality headset, but I didn't tell them what it is, how to use it, what to do. They literally sat in front of the device, and Eden Snacker is made out of a VR headset, but also a touchscreen station, which essentially solves all the problems with onboarding, explaining VR controls, all of the friction that you usually have when you're showing somebody VR for the first time, because you have to explain the controls, you have to make sure they don't trip over cables, you have to make sure your device is charged, you have to load up the experience for the people usually because they don't know what to do. And the touchscreen station with Eden Snacker takes care of all of that. So all you have to do, and that's what my mom and dad did, you press a button on a touchscreen. There's a big old play button that says touch to play. You press the play button, you choose an experience on the touchscreen. And since everyone these days can use a touchscreen, everyone can use VR suddenly. And so you pick your VR experience on the touchscreen. And then the moment you put the headset onto your face, the content automatically starts. So there is no going back and forth, looking inside the headset, like picking the right experience, putting it on my mom's face. My mom's like, "Oh, it's not playing." Then that's how it was before. Then I'm like, "I'm sorry, Mom. Can I get the headset back?" I took the headset back. I put the right content in. Gave it back to her again, and all of that was completely solved with Snacker. I put it in front of my parents and they could just use it, no problems. And it was, for me, in German we say Hausfrauentest, which is kind of discriminative, sexist on its own. Let's call it the everyday Joe test. That's actually more politically correct. It's an everyday Joe test, right? And I did that with my parents and they just got it. And that for me was this moment where I started believing in the mission that we have at Eden even more. Because the moment my mom, and sorry, Mom, in case you're listening to this, I know you aren't because you would never listen to a podcast. But if you were listening to this, I want to apologize. But you are a perfect example for people who can use a technology and can benefit from a technology if it's easy enough. But only then. Before that, no way. Don't touch it.
Yeah, and I think, you just mentioned it, and I think it's quite intuitive because it's almost representative of like a back in the day binoculars you can see in the opera. It's just like you put it on your face like that. There's no strap or anything from the Snackers.
Totally.
Right. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. That's a big part of the pipeline or of the system as well is that it doesn't have head straps. And
Right. Yeah.
I know some people are like, what the hell? I don't care about head straps. But our system isn't really made for gamers. It's not a gaming device. It's more for, imagine a museum, for example, or a car dealership or a retail store or an architectural office or a real estate agency. It's a device that sits on your table and you just want to have a quick look at a product or a visualization or an entertainment experience. And that's also why it's called Snacker, because it
like
makes
short bursts.
Exactly. It makes virtual reality content snackable.
Right.
And for those use cases, head straps are an absolute killer. Imagine you want to convince somebody that they should watch a 3-minute or a 5-minute virtual reality piece, but it'll take them like half a minute or a minute for setup. Putting on the straps, making sure your hair isn't in the way, adjusting the lenses, putting speakers onto your ears. That's easily a minute out of a 3-minute experience. So the everyday Joe has to commit to ruining their hair, maybe ruining their makeup just for an experience that takes 5 minutes. Many people don't do that. And I've seen that many times in my career. And I've given thousands of demos to virtual reality and thousands of virtual reality demos to newcomers.
Right.
Some people just don't want to use it because they're afraid of looking silly. It is really like that. And that's what Snacker also solves. We've got rid of the head straps and we've attached a handle to it. So like you said, you can hold it to your face like almost like an opera mask or like these old school goggles that you had in binoculars, opera binoculars. And so it's a concept that people kind of already understand. And in those scenarios where you don't want to ruin your hair or your makeup or you don't want to look silly, it looks much, much cooler than stripping a brick to your face, essentially.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, Dominic, it was such a pleasure talking to you. We've been way overboard with the time, but you know what?
I see it as well now. Oh my God.
You know what? It was so interesting. I just loved hearing you talk about this, and you're clearly a very passionate person. But I have one final segment before for the finale. But maybe we can do the social media handles and maybe something you wanted to shout out beforehand. Where can people find you, and what are you currently working on?
Check out I'm very visible on the internet. So my name is Dominic Eskofier. It's the French pronunciation. I hope you're spelling it correctly, Dorian.
Yeah, right.
And our company is called Eden. We're from South Africa, Johannesburg, South Africa, and the webpage is madebyeden.com. And if you Google Eden Snacker, you'll also find everything about our virtual reality device to make virtual reality so easy that everybody can use it. And get in touch with me. I always love to meet new people, especially in these times where you don't really meet new people. So hit me up. I'm more than happy to chat about that. And then thanks, Dorian, for having me. It was very much a pleasure, I really have to say.
Yeah, and you mentioned your reactivation of your Twitter account, so do you want to shout out that?
Oh yeah, that's Dolator, Dolator. But I'm mostly doing NFT stuff there, so better follow me on Facebook.
Okay, great. Yeah, and speaking of Facebook, we are now on Facebook. And maybe Mark Zuckerberg is going to directly delete the podcast and the podcast page in the next, I don't know, once this releases. But if not, I guess I'm lucky. So you can now follow us on Yumi Industry on Facebook, Instagram, on Twitter, and you can follow me personally. I'm at Dorian Chow on Instagram, on Twitter, and I post, silly pictures and I guess sometimes opinions about stuff which are mostly, I guess, wrong probably. And you know what? If you want to get some behind the scenes information, pictures and stuff, that's the best place to check out. But like I mentioned, the final segment, we're going to be some rapid fire questions. And this is a segment I call Lessons Learned. So I'm going to hit you with some milestones we already touched upon in long form on the podcast, and you just tell me like the lesson you learned working there or doing something like that.
Gotcha. Sure.
Okay. So what was the lesson learned at Computech being a product manager and an editor?
Follow your passion.
During your time at Rockstar Games?
Strive for excellence.
Planning and giving a TED Talk.
Being nervous can also be energetic. So if you're ever if you're ever worried about being too nervous, just imagine you're energetic instead.
And starting your own company, realities.io.
Startups are a roller coaster. Holy shit.
Working at Nvidia and now Eden.
Corporate's not my thing, but startup very much is. I'm a very happy person.
And last but not least, damaging your foot multiple times.
I'd always do it again.
Yeah, all right, everyone. Take care and yes, listen to you, hear you, see you on next episode. Take care. Bye.